Today, Naughty Nation, welcome back. Today I want to talk to you about flood coats. What's a flood coat? What do you do to prepare for it? And how you can have the most outstanding look and finish to your work when you're done.
The Naughty Artisan.
We're using Stone Coat epoxy, countertop epoxy for our resin. And it is suggested to be at a temperature of 65 to 80 degrees when you mix it. Today in Vegas this morning, it was a little cold for us. It was 45 degrees. So I actually took this and I set it out in the sun, warmed up my resin a little bit for about 45 minutes, got it nice and toasty. It's gonna help it mix and blend really well. This piece here is 20 inches wide and 70 inches long. And Stone Coat, for your flood coat, you want 3 ounces of epoxy per square foot. So that's roughly 2 feet by 6 feet. So that's 12 square feet. So 3 by 12 is our 36 square ounces, which is a little more than my measurements, but I also have this lip right here that we want to account for as well. And I'm going to use some additional epoxy to add a few more little waves in here. It's going to add some extra depth and dimension to our piece here. Now, epoxy is fluid and it moves, and every time you add a layer, it's adding another dimension to it. So on this piece here, we did our first pour. We've got our look in our design in here. I've added in some vinyl stickers for the client. So this one is Waterworld Scuba and Swim. I put this in here for their name. That's what they wanted. And then I got a little nod to myself down here. I've got a way for people to find me when they come see this awesome cabinet. There's my web address and there's my phone number and the guy who made it so that they could do it. So it's something you may want to do. So this is just a little cheap vinyl sticker. We bought a Cricut machine. I'll leave a link below where you can find those, but they're just a little die cut machine where you can make your own vinyl stickers. We designed it on there, printed it out, and stuck them on ourselves. Real quick, real easy, and we're able to do exactly what we want when it wants. All right, to the mix. I'm going to use a regular old screw drill with this mixing device. You can get any Home Depot. I'll drop a link for that as well. As you can see, I don't clean it as well when I'm done. It just has these nibs and knobs and stuff on them, and it helps mix it up as well. You can pull it off, but there's no need to really. It just helps you mix it up some more. I use these measuring buckets that I find at my local big box store. You can also buy them online. Conveniently, as you can see here, they've got measurements on already. Now this particular mix, we've decided we need 36 ounces. You know, my lines go to 32 ounces. I know I'm just going to go a little bit past the 16 to add those couple extra ounces on, and I'll do the same above 32. Stone Coat that we're mixing is a 1-to-1 ratio, so that this just helps me gauge where I need to be. I try to be as accurate as I can on my resin mix, okay? Prior to pouring on this piece or mixing up the epoxy, we want to prepare the surface to receive the second layer of epoxy. This is set up and it's a little hard. There's no tacky filling or anything like that. I can run my gloved hand across it, no problem. So all you need, get yourself a piece of 220 sandpaper. This is just regular old sandpaper that you can find anywhere. 220, and I'm only going to apply very, very light pressure. I don't really need to push down or I'm really gouging out. I'm just putting the lightest amount of pressure on, and I'm going to rough up that surface a little bit. I'm just giving the next layer of epoxy something to grip into and hold on to and meld itself to the top layer there. In doing that, you're not going to have any chance of somebody getting a fingernail starting it where it pulls off a whole layer, that kind of stuff. Don't push crazy hard. It just makes more work for you. It's going to scratch up the surface of this. It's going to look like, I just ruined what I did, and what did I do? Don't worry, the flood coat fixes it all. It becomes crystal clear, just like a piece of glass, and it looks really, really beautiful to finish effect. So I'm going to go ahead and take this sandpaper, rough this up real quick, and then show you guys how it goes. Just make sure I get the entire surface covered here. You can see I got these little surface scratches. I'm going easy on these vinyl over here. I don't want to tear those up and have to redo my work. So I'm just going to kind of work around them a little bit. As you can see, I've got a little bit of vinyl that's come up. You'll have some dust as well. Don't forget your edges. Your edges will you want that nice, same smooth glass look across them as well. So I'll kind of rough this up. Make sure our epoxy, as it flows over, has something to bite on as well. All right. And then just for a quick cleanup, I just grabbed some blue shop towels. Another thing you can do is just grab your air hose. Give yourself a quick blow. Then take your shop towels here. Just wipe off that top layer so we don't have any of this residue here. We want as clean a surface for our epoxy to adhere to so that we get a nice strong seal. You can see I picked up the bits there. Let me get the sides. All right. I don't know if you can see this on the video, but this surface is far from perfect, and I'm not sweating it. If you look right here, I've got a little hole where the surface tension didn't get broke. I'm right through to the board there, and I've got little dimples and little imperfections that are in this board. Over here, the epoxy didn't come across the wood the way I'd like it and solid. Not a big deal. That's actually why we do the flood coat. It will self-level, filling in these dimples and imperfections and giving us just a gorgeous smooth finish. And that's what we're looking for in this particular case. So I'm going to mix up this epoxy and be right back. All right, when you're pouring your epoxy, it's suggested that you pour B before A. I don't know why, but everybody always tells me it mixes better that way, and I don't want any bad results, so I just do it. I suggest you do it as well. So I'm gonna take my B, which is my hardener, and I'm gonna get to, this is a 1-to-1 ratio, remember? So I'm filling this just past my 16, because I want at least 36 ounces, and a little bit more because I'm gonna mix up a little white here. All right, so I'm almost dead center between my 16 and 24 ounce marker here. So that gives me a good place to stop. And now I'm gonna add my A in, which is the actual resin. Now the resin's a little thick. It's much more thicker than the hardener. So I'll just squeeze it lightly, which kind of causes these surges here and just helps it come a little quicker. So I don't have to just sit here and wait for it to drizzle out. This gets me where I want to go. And right there, as close to my 1-to-1 as I can get. Stick this on the table, put this right here. All right, I don't know how well you can see this, but if you look, you can see, just like oil and water don't necessarily want to mix, the hardener and the resin kind of separate. I've got I believe that's the hardener on top, the thinner, and then the thicker resin is sitting there on bottom. They're not blended very well at all. So you really want to take the time and blend your epoxy really, really well. If you don't, you risk having it not set up correctly or having tackiness throughout your project on the finish layer, which is not something you want at all. The last thing you want to do is come across a nice smooth countertop and you hit a tacky spot. It's terrible. Now, if that happens to you, not a problem. It can be fixed. Just mix up another flood coat and make sure you mix it thoroughly the next time. and pour over that would be the easiest fix. But honestly, the best thing to do is just make sure you mix your resin so that doesn't happen to you. So here we go. We're gonna mix, mix, mix. I'm gonna mix this for probably 3 to 5 minutes. When you're using this, particularly this drill, when I'm in the center here and not touching any sides, I go ahead and I'm full speed on my drill. And then you also want to scrape the sides of your buckets and the bottom as well to help get any of that residue. I'll slow down to a slower movement just like that as I'm hitting my bucket to get it. Now, these are hard and you can blow your bucket out, so be careful about going really fast, being pressed up against the side. You'll blow out your bucket, your resin spills everywhere, and it's a nightmare. So those are some tips on mixing. Now, I'm also going to introduce some air in here. It's going to look real white. Not a problem. We'll address that later on in this video. And those are just air bubbles that are being incorporated into the epoxy as we mix. Also, one other tip. Make sure you've always got one hand on your epoxy. I've worn my share of epoxy by even just adjusting my grip shortly. Once this epoxy gets moving, it really likes to fly out if you let go. So make sure you hold on to your bucket here while you're mixing. Okay, our epoxy's all mixed. Now with Stone Coat, we've got a little bit of working time. It's really, really nice. I've worked with other epoxies, man, you've got to mix it, you've got to pour it, you've got to rush it, get all your bubbles out. It's setting up on you, and man, it makes it tough to get a good result. One of my favorite things about this brand of epoxy is that we have a long working time, meaning we've got time to do what we want with it and get it just perfect before it starts setting up on us. Typically about an hour here in Vegas. We're a little bit warmer. In your more temperate climates, you're going to get an hour 15, maybe an hour and 20. You'll know when it's starting to set up. That's actually a long time to be working with epoxy. The things that we have are I've got a 1-inch notch trowel. You can order this on the link I'll provide below. It comes from Stone Coat. It's specifically made to have just the amount of epoxy left behind to coat the area that's there and not leave too much on the board and not leave enough on the board as well. So it's able to evenly distribute as much as you want. As you can see, this one's been used quite a few times. The epoxy is dry, it's hard, it's not going anywhere. I don't bother cleaning this, it kind of looks cool. The one thing you want to do is when you are done using these, don't set them down on your table like this. If you do that, your epoxy will block up your trowel holes and you'll have a problem. So instead, when you're done, just use the back of it. As you can see, this has been set down several times. Just set it like that. The epoxy will roll down your trowel, leaving you plenty of room for your next project and you won't run out of teeth. So that's a little tip there. Getting ready to pour, I'm going to want to have my chop brush. Now when you get your chop brush, this one's brand new, make sure you wanted to get all the bristles out. So kind of grab it, and I use my gloved hand. I'm just pulling on it as hard as I can right here. I want to get all the loose bristles out like that so that they don't end up in my piece. Now, if you get a little piece that comes through when you're chopping it, just take your brush and try to scoop it out like that. It's not a big deal. But the last thing I want is, as I'm going through with the finished product, to see a bristle embedded within my resin. That would suck. So anyway, here's this chop brush. Got my resin and my trowel. This is all I need to get going. I'm actually going to mix a little extra waves in this for 3D. So I'm going to just put a little bit of my resin here for this project. And away we go. Okay, when I pour this, I'm going to pour right down the center and try and keep an equal amount of mass or epoxy right down the center so that I have it evenly distributed so I don't have to push it around the board. If you get a little bit more on one side than the other, it's not a big deal. The trowel will level it out. Just makes your work a little easier. So I'm going to start here. Just go right down the center like that. As you can see, we've got a nice white looking color there, and that's just the air incorporated in. And I didn't do a great job pouring on that. I'll set that there. You can see I've got more mass here than there. So when I start my troweling, I'm going to start from this side and work this way to make sure I get a nice even cover. gonna prime my chop brush while I'm here as well. Just get that on. I'm gonna get some epoxy on. The reason we prime that is when I go to chop it, I don't want it pulling up the epoxy that I've already put down. I want that epoxy to stay where it's at, and this just helps you at the start. Priming my brush up here. Pull this out. I'm gonna set this right here, and we're gonna get to troweling. Now, when you trowel, it's important. See the angle that this is at right here? You want to keep that angle when you're on your piece. So I don't want to push it down flat like this where I'm pushing my epoxy everywhere. If I go too straight up and down, it's just a little awkward. So right there, that angle, which is the same angle it's at, gives me just the perfect amount down. As you can see, the trowel lines are just where I want them. So with this, I just want to get right up to the edge without going over at this point. I'm just trying to evenly coat my board. If you find yourself, and I've done this, and I think most everybody's done this, if you find yourself to the point where, hey, you didn't mix up enough epoxy and you're not quite getting there, I think it's best just to go ahead and mix up a little extra epoxy and make sure you've got your board adequately covered, than to try pushing it. Especially we're gonna heat this up. The resin gets flown a little bit. We want to make sure we've got enough on our board to do the project. We want a nice finished look. This is where the magic happens with the finish. That glass smooth look that people go crazy for comes from a nice flood coat that's been put down. You take the time to do it and do it right. So I've got plenty here. I think we're going to be fine on this piece. As you can see, I'm just making the corner. I'm not trying to push it over just yet. I'm going to bring this mass here with me. And the trowel is leaving just enough behind for me. I'll make sure we get a nice even coat here. I'm going to go ahead and bring some of this and begin to let that come over the edge. Just like that. All right, that's a pretty good even spread right there. From here, we're gonna take our chop brush, which is already primed, and we're going to chop our piece. Now, when I chop it, I'm just breaking the surface tension just like this. And another key when you're chopping is not to go in linear lines. I don't want lines like this. I want random patterns, but I want to make sure I cover the entire board. You know, so we'll just come around here and chop this baby out. Surface tension is, you know, when you fill your cup, but you can go above the brim of it. When you're pouring your drinks or whatever, when you were a kid, you would pour it above the brim. That's surface tension. It's just the tension that's in the water, or the liquid in this case, that holds it together. You want to break that so it flattens out level. The other thing that we're doing with this chopping is you can see right here there's trowel lines that are from us troweling it out. I don't want to see that in my finished product. This mixes it as well. Helps us go there. All right, I feel like we've troweled this out pretty good. So make sure I hit my edges as well. I've got all this epoxy here. I'm just gonna get some on my brush. And I'm gonna brush my edges. We wanna make sure we've got a nice coat of epoxy on our edges as well. So I got a little piece I missed on my corner here when it rolled over the top. But I got it now. Okay. Now it's time to torch our piece up. All right, something to remember with your torch, make sure you take a blue paper towel and wipe your hands off really well so that you don't have epoxy on them. This is just a regular old propane that you can buy at any discount store, big box store that goes in like your camp stoves. And this top here goes for them as well, the torch bit. These are a little spendy, so if you have epoxy on your hands and you're using this, it'll dry up and lock this up, making this a piece of junk you got to throw away and replace. Just a little tip to help your tools last longer. Now when I'm torching this out, I'm using it to get all the bubbles out. You can see they're starting to rise to the top anyways. And check the link out. I'm going to have a section on when to use a torch, how to use it, and when to use a heat gun and how to use it, the pros and cons of each one, and what could go wrong. We'll even screw it up a little bit. So check that out. I think you'll be interested. But in the meantime, I'm just going to torch this out. Something when I do my final coats is I only do 3 passes when I torch it. And I like to change directions each time. So the first time I'll go this way, the second time I'll go this way, and the third time I'll come back over as well. In between, I'll let it rest a couple or 3 minutes and let any bubbles that are going to come back up. I don't need to hit them right away. So let's check this out. When I'm torching, I'm using a nice fluid motion back and forth. For the women who are watching this, I've been told it's like blow drying your hair, that same moment, or same movement. I don't want to keep it in the same spot and cause it to burn. I'm just causing the bubbles to release. I think you can see that on the video, and it makes this really clear glass-like appearance that we're going for there. For the men, if you've ever hosed off your driveway like I have, it's a similar motion to hosing off your driveway. Yeah, that's the easiest thing I can say. Don't be afraid to get close to your piece. You can see my flames actually touching the epoxy, but I'm always moving it so we're not overheating it in any one spot. Man, that never gets old to me. One thing to keep in mind, when you're torching your surface, go ahead and do that. Don't torch your edges. We've got gravity working against us. When we torch it, it heats the epoxy up a little bit, it thins and it wants to move. So this is actually moving and flowing. This is the self-leveling portion. And if I'm doing that on the side, I'm just causing my epoxy to run off, and I don't want that. I want to keep that. So now that I've done that, I'm going to go look at my piece real quick, and I'm going to go through and see if there's any little bits that have some surface tension. I've got a couple holes here. You just give them a little tap with your finger, and they'll dissolve. I see a couple right here on the edge of my piece. I'm just going to tap it out, and they're covered up. And all I'm doing is making sure we don't have any dimple marks or anything like that in the epoxy. I've got a little stuff on my back, so I'm just going to use my fingers and rub that across there. Oh, a nice, consistent, smooth edge on my piece as well. So I'm just grabbing some extra epoxy on my hands and just rubbing it here, anywhere that I saw. Take your time. We've got plenty of time with this stuff to really get it right, so let's do that. And your clients will thank you. Your spouses will thank you. These just, man, I never get tired of it. They're just gorgeous, the finished products. I can't say enough about it. I love working with this stuff. Okay, so I've torched this out twice now. I'm going to torch it out one more time just quickly, and then we'll be done with this baby. And that's how you get a crystal clear, beautiful flood coat on your project.
The Naughty Artisan.
Hey Naughty Nation, if you like this video,
Please subscribe to us, ring the bell so you can see our projects when they come up in the future. Leave us a comment, drop us an email. We'd love to hear from you.